Hi and welcome to this next part of the Meng Toon Tiger build, and the ejector pin marks that I mentioned on the rear fenders in the last video, as you can see there, have been filled, and I've sanded one of them. You can see how obvious they are now. Now they're actually sanded smooth with filler in them. You can see there's 4 of those on each one, and to take that back down to plastic, I just used a simple sort of nail file that you'd find in your cheap stores or your super drugs, that kind of thing. Using the less coarse side to take it down, and then what I'm going to do is just run over that with some 600 and then some 1200 grit wet and dry, just to get a nice smooth finish. And I'll do the same on this one. On the subject of filling seams, this is the rear stowage box for the Tiger, and I mentioned that it had a little seam down the middle where the 2 halves joined together. It wasn't hugely noticeable, but it would have been visible with paint on, so I filled that using quite an old tried and tested method, which is a sprinkling of baking powder and then flooding it with super glue. This sets up really quickly, and it sets really hard, so it's only good for small seams. Large seams you need to use a proper filler or some melted sprue or sprue glue or something like that. But for small seams this works excellently, and being really hard it does take a bit of smoothing down. Same thing with that, I just smoothed the bulk of it down with this, and then I will be using the 600 grit and 1200 grit wet and dry to get that nice and smooth. But as you can see now, there's no catch at all when you run your fingernail across it, so that's nice and smooth. On the other subject, which was the rear plate, you can see there that I've assembled the exhausts onto there, and short of the rear fenders, mud flaps, whatever you want to call them, being glued in place. That's complete and ready to be glued onto the kit, and then I can go on to assembling the model. So this is where we're at now. I've assembled the rear with the exhausts and what have you onto the main body tub of the Tiger. The turret is assembled and complete, and it's missing the rail from the cupola or cupola, because I'm not using that because the one I'm modelling it on doesn't have one. The road wheels, as you can see, have been assembled with their polycaps. They'll be mounted on cocktail sticks for spraying in individual sets before attaching to the body, and I will paint and weather the tracks once they're attached, because obviously being flexible vinyl, that makes sense rather than trying to paint and weather them while they're loose off the model. These will be painted separately, the shovel will be painted separately, and then the body and turret obviously will be painted as 2 separate components before fixing them together. And as I mentioned, there's a couple of little bits of sprue up here which I'll be doing something with a little later once I've done with the spraying and what have you. So that's where we're at just now, so it's off to spraying. What I'm going to do for the spraying is the AHH method from watching Andy's Hobby Headquarters on building various bits of armour. I'm going to try the method that he uses in his videos. So far this is where we're at. We've got the NATO black base coat on. As I say, I'm using the Andy's Hobby Headquarters sort of method. If you've watched any of his videos, you'll see he tends to use a black base coat and then a white highlight coat for certain areas, and then paint coats over the top. I'm not typically a fan of pre-shading. I have tried it with airplane models in the past and didn't think that it was really beneficial, to be honest, but I thought I'd give it a try on this, because the worst case scenario is the pre-shading won't have any effect, but the top camo pattern will still be okay anyway. As you can see here, we've got the white coat on the parts, and we've got the road wheels with the centres just highlighted a little and then they will be filled in with the main colour, which is probably going to be a green, and leaving the black tyres. So I'm either going to see if I can mask those off, or if there's going to be an easier way, maybe just touch them up afterwards or something before I fit them to the vehicle. And then we're going to start laying down the 2-colour camo. So as you can see, I'll just slide this into view here for you. So we've got the road wheels all painted up, or the centres highlighted, and we've got this little bit here which is going to serve a specific purpose. This is a bit of modified sprue, and that will become more apparent as we go further on into the build. I'm going to move that back over there out of the way, and we'll just take a look, zoom in here, take a look at the base. And what I've done there is using different amounts of white paint, I've kind of tried to hit most of the high spots, although there's a lot of the back that would be shadow spots, which I have kind of lightened as well. But we'll see what effect that has. As I say, I'm not a big fan of pre-shading, but I have seen interesting results on models painted on forums, tutorials and the like. So we'll see what that does, see what that looks like. And then here is the zoom out a little bit on that. Here's the turret with a little bit of additional modification there, and some of you may recognise that tow cable and the particular thing that it's from. But if not, all will be revealed soon. So you can see we've got the first coat of paint on there, on the green on the turret. And I was going to do the whole thing green and then just paint the second colour in the corresponding camo, but I wanted to try and make the most of that highlight, shadow and highlight base coat primer, if you will. So I've done this as green camo. I've done the whole underside is just green. I'm not going to mess about camoing that, but then all of the other sides, front sides and the upper portion have been painted with the green camo, and then the bits that are currently white will be painted with the second paint colour, which I'll probably do tomorrow now, so it's getting a little late. And you can see the road wheels there. What I did was individually mask each one off using a circle cutter. Didn't take as long as I expected, so it's only 4 wheels per side. These were just painted. The drive sprockets and the idler sprockets at the back were just painted. The outer face was just all painted green, and then these were given a very light coat of green to try and show up the variation between the light and the dark. Probably gone a little bit too light on, say for example, that one there, but once it's had a little bit of an oil wash, a coat of clear and oil wash and a bit of weathering, that should look quite good. So as I say, the next thing will be the next part of it will be the other camo colour. Here we've got the second coat of paint onto the main body tub and the turret. The colour used there is SS Camo Black Brown, because it's very dark, but I wanted a very dark brown rather than a black. And while I'm quite happy with the colour, the paint itself was an absolute pig to spray. That was Vallejo model colour, which I know are not designed or intended for spraying, but I have sprayed them before with some success, thinned with Tamiya X20A acrylic thinners, which didn't work particularly well. I'm sort of wary of using straight IPA with water-based acrylic paints because Citadel, for example, go sort of cloggy and lumpy, and I've not actually tried Vallejo, although it cleaned up quite nice and easily with straight IPA, so I might actually try thinning it with straight IPA in the future. But I used a bit of Tamiya and a bit of water, and it was a real pick to spray. It's probably hard to tell, but if I can focus on this, probably hard to tell, but if you look at the left vent, for example, it's a bit patchy where the pigment started sort of breaking apart, like it was overly thinned, but it wasn't. I mean, it actually took some spraying to get through the nozzle, and it's 0.5 nozzle on an Iwata airbrush, so as you can imagine, it's not that the nozzle's too small for it to get through. Didn't spray well at all, so I'm not pleased with the spraying, but I like the colour. The green, however, which I think might be olive green, I can't remember now, is a bit too bright for my taste. Sorry, a bit too dark for my taste, for what I wanted. So I think what I might do is actually mix up some more green with a bit of white to make it a little paler, and go over the green bits again. But that's the camo on the body at the moment. As you can see here, I have actually gone over the green. Once it had dried this morning and I took a look at it, it was the difference between the dark brown black and the green was so minimal, you could barely really see any difference even in natural daylight, although it's not the brightest time of the year, obviously, but even in natural daylight you could barely see the variation between them. So I mixed up some more using some white, yellow, and a green that might have been slightly lighter, which I should have maybe tried first, but even then it would have still been too dark. But I mixed up a lighter green, as you can see, and I've gone over the green areas again and sort of covered over a few of the little bits that the brown didn't cover particularly well, so there's a little bit of variation difference in the camo, and I've given it a bit more of a dusting of the green underneath in where the tracks and wheels are going to go, although that won't be particularly visible. So that's a bit more like I was looking for. And that's where we're at currently. The next thing, once that's dried, will be a coat of, actually there's a couple of little bits to do on there, and then a coat of clear, and then a bit of an oil wash, or I think, just to pick out some of the raised areas. And then after that it will be a coat of satin or matte varnish, I think, and that will not be far off done for the actual main tank itself. That's where we're at the moment. So join us in the next video to see the next update, and thank you for watching.